founding fathers, take a look around. Is trouble coming? Are we going down? Mother, daughter, and your brother too. Get your mind straight when it's up to you. Hey, you gotta see the storm a-coming. Hey, you gotta feel it coming through. Hey, you gotta see the storm a-coming. Whoa, it's coming after you.
Hello, this is Reflections of an Uncommon Common Man, another episode coming to you. Today we have Jimmy Catrone, our co-host, and we have Kenan O'Kelly, real old friend of mine, and we also have my grandson, Connor McDaniel. And today we want to kind of delve into the things that have been going on in the news, like the removal of statues and that type thing. A few years back, this kind of stuff's been in the news for a long time. I remember probably 10, 15 years ago, they were trying to remove the Confederate name off of Vanderbilt, one of their dormitories over there. And so it's been around for a long time. They've been trying for years to remove the name of Forrest Hall, named after Nathan Bedford Forrest, on Middle Tennessee State University campus, and things like that. So this issue's been around for a long time, and now because never let a crisis go to waste kind of attitude. Black Lives Matter and Antifa and these communist groups have taken advantage of the situation that's going on right now, and so we've seen a lot of statues come down, but the mob has taken them down. And but what does this all mean? I've said for many years, if we remove Confederate statues, then will this not eventually lead to the removal of anybody that had anything to do with slavery, anything bad at all? And actually, this is all coming to fruition right now. I didn't really understand. I had a feeling that it would come to this, but I didn't really understand till the other day. I was listening to a local talk show, and a guy called in, and he hit the nail on the head, and a light bulb come on in my head, and I realized this is what it's all leading to. And he said that in order to delegitimize our founding documents, they must first delegitimize our heroes. And that's what they're basically doing. The reason I know this is because they're not stopping with Confederate statues. They're tearing down. They want to tear down statues of Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, and it's an old communist thing, a communist trick. It's called cultural cleansing. The definition of cultural cleansing, I looked up on the internet, is cultural genocide or cultural cleansing is a concept that lawyer Raphael Lemkin distinguished in 1944 as a component to genocide. It also says that in practice it involves the eradication and destruction of cultural artifacts such as books, artwork, and structures, and the suppression of cultural activities that do not conform to the destroyer's notion of what is appropriate. Motives may include the religious iconoclasm as part of a campaign of ethnic cleansing to remove the evidence of people from a locale or history, as part of an effort to implement a year zero in which the past and its associated culture is deleted and history is reset. And again, if we were dealing with normal people, I personally believe there's a lot of people out there that are decent people that have been who do not see the ultimate end game of all this. And so they sincerely believe that it's okay that we should pull down some of these statues. And to a point, I could agree with them on some of them. But again, I don't like giving the left slippery slopes. So what I want to do is kind of throw out to you. I had a Facebook friend today who, I put on there that destroying statues is the Nazi equivalent of burning books. And I said they didn't stop with books, And so this guy wrote back, well, the Confederate statues are the equivalent of Nazi statues. I disagree with that. What are y'all feelings on that? First, I told him, I said, well, Confederacy wasn't about genocide. The Nazis were, and I think that's where you draw the line on that. But, but anyway, anybody got an opinion on that?
I definitely think Nazis are a greater evil than the Confederacy. Not saying the Confederacy was any good, but yeah, it's a bit different. But here's the funny thing, like years ago when we were talking about them tearing down statues, the last time this was happening, everyone was saying, hey, what's next? Washington, what's next? Jefferson, what's next? And they, looked at us and they said, well, that's a slippery slope fallacy. That's not going to happen.
Right.
We just want these down. And, here we go.
Right.
It's all coming. It's all coming to a head here.
Right. And, that's the thing that I don't know. I've seen these kind of things happen so much, and that's why I don't like giving the left any kind of slippery slope when it comes to gun control. It's like gun control. I used to think, yeah, we can throw them a bone, but not anymore because their ultimate, all you got to do is go look up their words on the subject, and you'll find that that's their ultimate goal is to disarm America. And it's just like you take bump stocks, with the guy out in Las Vegas. I think we talked about this, but this guy was a millionaire. You get rid of bump stocks, okay? You're throwing the left a bone, okay? But it does nothing to stop mass shootings because here was a guy who was a millionaire, multimillionaire. He could buy all the guns in the world he wanted. You think you're going to stop a multimillionaire from going out and buying all the bump stocks that he wants to buy just because you banned them? It did nothing, absolutely nothing, to stop another Las Vegas type shooting.
Yeah, if you don't think the goalpost is going to move at this point, you're not paying attention.
Right.
You're just not.
Yeah, the thing that's been disheartening to me is that George Floyd was the catalyst to all the recent events. Of course, we've had things prior to this, but everybody was united.
Right.
We weren't at odds on what happened to him.
Right.
But that wasn't good enough. They have to maintain a divide and keep people divided who I wanted to stand with everybody on this.
Right.
But it couldn't happen. They had to create this continual divide. And now people and look, a lot of people rail against Facebook and talk about Facebook and Twitter, but that's where everybody's hanging out. That's where everybody's talking about these things. And you just see this huge gulf between people. And it's just perpetuated over and over. And I think it's going to take the people to decide not to be coaxed into these things. And I guess that can only start at the local level, right? Because when I talk to people around here,
Right.
I don't feel this animus between me and black people that I talk with. I told you yesterday, I think, about how a while back I found myself talking with a black woman in Lowe's, and we were hugging each other before it was all over.
Yeah. It's what me and my wife was talking about is, she was talking about how nice these black cashiers that she runs into, and like the nursing staff at a hospital where she goes to get therapy, and how nice they've been to her and all that. And I told her, I said, well, this is a perfect example of that. If these people would just shut up about all this, we could get along. But it's the old divide and conquer. That's why I'm not going to be sucked in to their games. I'm not going to play their games, and that's why I'm doing this podcast. I want people to understand that it's not about George Floyd. It's not about any of that stuff.
Well, we're not even talking about George Floyd anymore.
Well, right.
We're not talking about police brutality. We're not talking about George Floyd. We're talking about anything but
everything.
And it's all just a tactic. Like, we were talking about earlier, and we named the podcast, this is divide and conquer. That's what they're doing. And they'll use race to do it. Like, we were talking about this the other day, weren't we? Like, race is not in my opinion, race is not a biblical concept. It's a political concept.
Right.
Like, God didn't make us, and it's like, all right, we're going to make we're going to make the white people in our image, and we're going to make the black people slightly different. And, I don't read that in there. I didn't see that verse.
And this is not necessarily about blacks anymore. It's about a left-white agenda.
And it's like, if you would just drop the race, like if you just stop talking about race, you're putting people in these different people groups, and it's that you wonder why there's a divide.
Well, it's just like
if we were all humans, in our eyes and not black humans and white humans.
This is an old tactic of the communists. You go all the way back to the 1930s, 40s, 50s. It's just like when John Kennedy. He was dealing with the civil rights movement, okay? He had it right dumped in his lap, okay? And John Kennedy was smart enough to realize that, hey, okay, he's this cold warrior that's got to stand up to the Soviet Union. He stood up to him. Well, he screwed up at the Bay of Pigs, but, next year at the Cuban Missile Crisis, he stood up to him. And but he was trying to make the nation understand that how can we as a nation defend what we say is a democracy, freedom, and all that we fought for in World War II and all that, if we're treating a particular group of people as second-class citizens. Because he understood the propaganda value of that to the Soviets. The Soviets, they didn't care about our black people, but they were using that to divide the country, to put pressure, international pressure on the United States. Oh, you're talking to us about freedom, but look at your country. Look at the way you treat black people, And so Kennedy was trying to get the American people to understand that, hey, we can't keep doing this and say we're a democracy, and tout that to the world, And that's what's going on right now. Although we don't have a major race problem in this country, the communists are still behind all this division, and of course, they're teaching in our colleges, they're teaching it everywhere, and they're pushing that agenda, and that's why I'm trying to get, I try to steer everybody back when we get into this discussion, whether I'm talking to my daughter or I'm talking to someone on the street or whatever. Don't get sidetracked by George Floyd or what was his name, Rayshard Brooks or whoever. That's not what this is about. This is a communist movement that's going on. This effort to get rid of our heritage is the only way that they can ultimately overthrow the capitalism and the United States is by delegitimizing our government delegitimizing our heroes, our statues, our past. Once they do that, then they can turn around and delegitimize the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, okay? And then they can get rid of that. That's their goal, okay? And that's what we have to wake up to. And it's the same thing.
Greg, do a real quick, not to get off the subject, but on that subject, do a quick recap for listeners about them coming in, integrating into the colleges. Just a quick recap for listeners who,
Basically, in 1915, I'll try to be as quick
brief,
as I can. World War One, all these nations banded. I mean, they like the French fought the Germans, the British fought the Germans, the Russians fought the Germans, Austrians fought the French, Austrians fought the British, on down the line. All these different groups of working class people, the proletariat. Instead of workers of the world uniting as Marx wanted them to, they were patriotic and they went to fight for their individual countries. They were nationalistic. Okay, so the Marxists were sitting back and saying, "Whoa, what happened here? We're not making any progress here." So a guy named Antonio Gramsci, who was an Italian, he wrote it's called the Prison Diaries, I think was the name of it. He was in prison of all places. And he writes this diary saying that we need a long march through our culture. We need to take over the culture, okay? We need to go through the arts and entertainment, the colleges, our educational system, every aspect of society, of our culture. We need to infiltrate the family, the church, on and on and on. So that's what they've done over the years. And in 1930,
did they just target America or did they target other countries?
Well, they were. This has gone all over the world, but way it got to America was in the 1930s. There was Jewish communists in Germany. Of course, Hitler hated Jews and he hated communists. Okay, and so they left Germany to escape from Hitler. Guess where they came? They came to Columbia University. Okay, that's where their poison became entrenched, and then they spread out through the American universities. By the 1960s, they were pretty well entrenched in higher education. Since that time, and they were behind the anti-war movement, the counterculture, all this stuff, the drugs and all that stuff, that because they were trying to break down the underpinnings of society.
And just get into that a little bit. I'm curious myself. So they get into Columbia University,
right?
And you've got the college has a mandate for what they want at that time,
right?
What they want taught,
right?
So they would come in as professors and so forth to be hired,
yeah.
And
but
then,
see, in the 1920s, you had a communist professor that came up with this idea of tenure. Tenure. Okay,
right.
And the reason they did, because these professors that were preaching this garbage was they couldn't get fired. That's why they wanted tenure.
Right.
So
college is fertile for, hey, you shut the classroom door, you're doing a lecture or whatever,
right.
and you kind of
you're
manipulating the content.
You're doing, you're raising your children like Ken over here. Ken's a good Christian man. How many kids you got now?
Two.
Okay.
You could have said 6.
Have you got any in college?
No, I've got one married who's 25. And
hallelujah.
I've got one that's 15.
Yeah.
And we homeschooled both of our boys.
Okay, well, we'll see now.
So we headed off all of this at the pass, right?
Yeah. But
so we've indoctrinated them into Jesus so that they're prepared when they do go to the liberal colleges.
I like the saying, prepare your child for heaven and not for Harvard,
Yeah.
But anyway, but that's the thing, though. As good as he's doing with his child, let's say his child wants, the 15-year-old is a boy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's say he decides he wants to go to Harvard or Vanderbilt or whatever. Okay. Or MTSU over here. All that he taught him may go out the window when these communists get a hold of him, Sure. I mean, hopefully it won't. I believe in the old adage in the Bible, raise a child the way he should go and he'll never depart from it. I hope that sticks. You know?
But take it to the next step. They go back to the 30s. They come in and they're lecturing and they're tenured. You know, they become
Right.
tenured. They can't get fired.
Right.
And then you get manipulation of the content, the actual books themselves.
Absolutely. They write the
They rewrite.
they write the textbooks that are going in our secondary schools.
Publish material.
And publish.
do
It's
the
just
whole
like, and they set the curriculum. And, you know, the people, the teachers, and this is no reflection on my daughter's a teacher. You know, what I mean, and I know a lot of good teachers, but the thing about it is, where does a teacher go to get educated? They go to get educated in the colleges. Okay.
Switch gears for a minute because I
Yeah.
want to go through this quick so you can
Yeah.
go back to your thing. But how did they integrate Hollywood? How did that come about?
Well, Hollywood's always been left wing. I mean, going way back. Okay, now the upper management, like, you know, the ones that studio owners like Louis B. Mayer and people like
Right,
that,
MGM and
they were pretty conservative back then. But the lower echelon, they were always pretty left wing. You know, way back. Okay. At least, though, you can say, when I say left wing, they were a lot more liberal, okay? But look at World War II. World War II, a multitude of these people went and fought for the United States. They were patriotic and all
See,
that.
it's a little bit of a jump to go from a liberal Hollywood to communist.
Well, but
how
what
did they get there?
But see, what people don't understand. There's a classical liberal, which I'm a classical liberal. A classical liberal believes in the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights. But a liberal that, like, I'm talking about Alan Dershowitz kind of liberal. I'm talking about Ed Koch kind of liberal. The guy from the one that ran under Gore, what was his name? Vice President. But anyway, those kind of liberals that there's patriots. They believe in America. They're truly progressive. I mean, I don't agree, like Alan Dershowitz, I don't agree with much of anything he believes in, but the thing I like about Alan Dershowitz, he still believes in the Constitution, you know. And but see, there's a liberal, and then there's a left to the left, which is basically they're either socialist or communist, you know. And socialism is just the first step to get to communism, okay. But that's what Hollywood is today. Hollywood is not really liberal like the ones back in the 30s. It's more very left wing, you know. And it's a place, you know, they always talk about, what's the name of the guy during the McCarthy, you know, Joseph McCarthy. Talk about McCarthyism and how people were blackballed and stuff like that. Well, the same thing's going on in Hollywood today. If you're a young conservative actor, you ain't about to let anybody know you're conservative. Right. You won't get a job. Now, the older guys like, you know, what's his name? Make My Day, Clint Eastwood and people like that. See,
he can do what he wants.
They're so entrenched they can do anything they want to, you know.
Now go to the third category of media. And that's really an offshoot, I would say, an offshoot of education. People going into media and the same.
Look at MSNBC, NBC, CBS, ABC,
CNN.
The vast majority of them came out of the Democratic Party. They're even Democratic operatives, like the guy that hosts Good Morning America, Stephanopoulos. He worked for Clinton. You know, right. he was a big insider. You might have 10% of those. You know, like for example, what's his name, Tucker Carlson. He used to work for, I believe, it was MSNBC and CNN. You know. But look at him, you know. So,
well, I just want you to bring that stuff out a little bit for listeners, you know.
Yeah, but that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. That's what's behind all this. Now, what I was getting ready to say though, you know, Lenin called, and of course there's some debate on whether he actually said this or not. But I think if he didn't, he should have. Is the people that are the good people, the ones who truly think that these statues, some of them need to go and all that, they're just useful idiots. Okay, I'm not saying that in a pejorative way. I'm just simply saying that they just don't know they're being manipulated, you know. And but on the other hand, too, you got people on the right, or people that, like, they're defending these Confederate statues to the hilt. They want to defend it from the standpoint of, well, Civil War was not about slavery; it was about states' rights, which is not true, so it can kind of go both ways. But I want to talk about, too, what this idea has been around for a long time. I don't know if any of you ever read the book The Jefferson Lies. It was written by a guy named David Barton. He talks about 4 different ways that historians have always tried to tear down our historical figures. For example, deconstructionism, post-structuralism, modernism, minimalism, and academic collectivism. And deconstructionism tends to de-emphasize and malign a subject, okay? So, and in this case, he was writing about Thomas Jefferson. People degrade him because he was a slave owner, okay? Post-structuralism undermines the reality or the truth, the reality of truth or the will of God, okay? We see that all the time by a lot of leftist historians. Modernism, this is the one that I'm always bringing up, examines events as if they occurred today, or historical figures as if they lived today. Now, we've talked about Abraham Lincoln. By today's standards, Abraham Lincoln would be a racist, okay? By the standards of his day, when he made that last speech that caused his death, when he said, I want to see black soldiers vote, and I want to see the very intelligent black people vote, okay? That was a very progressive quote for that day. And it got him killed, because John Wilkes Booth was listening to it in the crowd. But that's what you're talking about, modernism, because a lot of people today would look at that quote and they wouldn't think about Abraham Lincoln and give him credit for the day he lived in. They would think today, well, that's a racist comment, by today's standards, that would be, Minimalism is taking a very complicated problem and reducing them to bumper sticker slogans or one-line platitudes. Now, Thomas Jefferson, this happens a lot when you're talking about Sally Hemings. Y'all know who Sally Hemings is, don't you? Well, anyway, she was a slave who supposedly Jefferson had sexual relations with, and was the father of at least maybe 6 children. I think they can trace maybe 4 to him, but, possibly. The only thing they know for sure is that Jefferson, the DNA shows A. Jefferson is related to Hemings' descendants, okay? But they can't pinpoint that it was Thomas Jefferson. He had brothers and relatives that were on the plantation that could have been doing the same thing. I personally believe that Jefferson did have a relationship with Sally Hemings. The only reason I believe it is because of all his slaves, he never freed any of them, even up on his death, except for the Heming children, okay? So that indicates to me that he had a special attachment to them, okay? But this is where, the modern person today can say Jefferson was racist because he had sexual relations with a slave. That's a one-line, or that's a platitude or a bumper sticker, okay? But they don't look into the fact that Jefferson actually was in love with this woman. She was a half-sister of his wife. His father-in-law was a slave owner that did have relations with his slaves, and Sally was the half-sister of Martha Randolph. I'm also told he was crazy about Martha Randolph. That was his first wife. His first wife died, and then when he saw the young Sally Hemings, he fell in love all over again because she looked like the twin, except a darker color, of his dead wife. So he fell in love with her. She loved him, because look at it this way: they're living in France. she could have been free. She could have said, heck with you. I'm staying here in France where it's free, and I'm not going back to the United States, But she went back with him,
How old was she when they got married? I
mean,
not married, but
they couldn't get married.
But
the relationship may have started when she was 14, because she was 14 when she went over there. But the point I'm trying to make, this was
so he wasn't a racist; he was a pedophile.
Well, yeah, I get it. Well, but back then, it wasn't. I had a sister, and this was in the 1950s. She was 14, married a 26-year-old soldier at Fort Campbell. That happened all the time in the South, and they're still married, she's almost 80 years old, or is 80 years old. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that they had a true relationship. They had a true love relationship, but because of the culture of the time, they couldn't openly reveal that, okay? And so it was much more complicated than what a lot of people try to make it out to be, And then the last thing is academic collectivism. And this is something I see all the time reading historians. It's like they're talking to other academics, when they write a book or whatever. They don't really they don't go back to original sources like David Barton does and find out the truth. They take the word of another academic, and that's the way a lot of myths and lies get spread around. It's like Thomas Jefferson. And this book changed my way of looking at a lot of things, because for many years I thought Thomas Jefferson was a agnostic. He was very skeptical of religion. He was for separation church and state, which in essence he was for separation church and state, but not the way it's interpreted today. He wanted the separation of the United States government from having anything to do with how the states worshipped, like the state of Virginia could worship the way they wanted to, the state of Tennessee could worship the way they wanted to, But another thing too is, here was a guy who was president of the United States and established a church service inside the Capitol building and attended it every week while he was president of the United States. Okay. So that doesn't say to me that guy's anti-religious or, now he had different areas of his life that were, where his ideas were changing, but he lived to be in his 80s, I think. And so he went through a lot of changes in his life, but for the most part, he was a religious person, now whether he was a saved Christian, we don't know, but he at least
Well, he does have his own translation of the Bible. Did you know that?
Well, he does, but that's
he
nothing.
Took out the parts he didn't like.
But there's a reason for that, and don't get me wrong. I think the Bible tells us, that you don't add or detract to the Bible. Okay, and so from that standpoint, yeah. But David Barton says the reason he did that is because he wanted a Bible that could go to the Indian tribes. And he felt like that all the stuff that was in there about miracles and stuff like that would just serve to confuse them. Now, I'm not saying that he was right in having that outlook, but that was why he did it. It wasn't because he necessarily didn't, believe in those things, That's David Barton's, way of looking at it. But anyway,
he was considered a deist, right?
Well, he was, but I think that's a misinterpretation of history.
I'm reading something right here, and it says Jefferson was a deist because he believed in one God, in divine providence, in the divine moral law, and in rewards and punishments after death, but did not believe in supernatural revelation.
Well, now
that's a big debate I've always heard.
But you need to read that book. You need to read the book, The Jefferson Lies, because Barton is known for going to the original sources. He doesn't go to other academics, and borrow from them. He goes to the original manuscripts and papers and things like that. And that's what I'm saying. he may, Jefferson may not in what we would call, he wasn't probably evangelical. Okay, he wasn't, and whether
He wasn't a fundamentalist. in
right,
other
right.
words.
But I think he probably had an Episcopalian outlook on things. He was raised in the Episcopalian church and that type thing.
And
But
the whole wall of separation between church and state. This is what he actually wrote to the Danbury Baptist, because it's my understanding they were concerned that they were going to be ramrodded and forced into a certain religion.
Well,
they
they
weren't going
were-
to be able to practice religious
well,
freedom.
it was Connecticut, wasn't it?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Well,
Danbury,
see,
Connecticut.
they were a Congregationalist state, and they had a lot of I think at that time, I may be wrong, but I think at that time, the Congregationalists were supported with the tax money of the state of Connecticut, and so they were for religious liberty, just like Jefferson was. But in essence, what the letter was all about was the fact that they were encouraging Jefferson to establish a national day of prayer, and Jefferson, rightfully so, was saying that, hey, the federal government cannot establish a national day of prayer. That's up to your individual state. That's what he was telling them. Mm-hmm.
He literally wrote, "Our sentiments are uniformly on the side of religious liberty, that religion is at all times and places a matter between God and individuals, that no man ought to suffer in name, person, or effects on account of his religious opinions." And what he said specifically about the separation of church and state is, he said, "I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state." So all he was really saying is that the freedom of religion clause protects you, and you don't have to worry, Danbury Baptist,
Absolutely.
that we're going to come and institute a formal religion,
Right.
and yours is
The
going to be
federal
denied.
government.
That's right.
All the First Amendment was to keep the federal government from establishing a national religion.
Yes, so
That's
he
what
was
all about.
actually endorsing
Right.
freedoms, not trying to prohibit them
Right.
like they're doing today.
Well, give me an example. Jefferson passed what they call the Religious Freedom Act of 1776 in his own state. Okay, him and Madison had a lot to do with that, and basically they were more or less saying to the Anglican Church, who had been the state religion of Virginia, we're no longer financing your church with our tax money. Okay. You're not going to be the state church of Virginia, okay? So he was in essence saying to all people of all faiths in Virginia that you have the right to worship any way you please. Mm-hmm. Now, Jefferson, being a believer in states' rights, would never have looked over at, say, North Carolina and said to North Carolina, well, you need to pass a law just like we passed, because it was all about what was going on in Virginia. North Carolina had to take care of their own. In other words, if North Carolina wanted to have an established church, they could have, because the state had the right to worship any way it wanted to.
Yes.
Yeah,
people were railing against me the other day because
Yeah.
I was talking about the CHOP in Seattle, right?
Right.
And my sentiments were, listen, if the people in Seattle want to allow them to come in and take over that block of the city, it's up to them. It's their state, right? If they want to do that, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't support that. But how far do states' rights go in all of these
Well,
things?
I think in that case, though, I kind of am tempted to agree with you. But when it comes to the rule of law, when you have the breakdown of the rule of law, when the mob can dictate to people, this is the way it's going to be, that's where the federal government has to take action.
I think it's a matter of how they did it as opposed to the end result. If it was done moderately and they took it over, but they took the portion, but it wasn't done violently, that would be a good.
Yes, the federal government has a right to come in to stop somebody who's literally trying to take over the state.
Yeah, because here's what if here's the deal. This is the same thing that Lincoln faced. Okay, the South was saying we're no longer part of the United States. Okay, so he said not no, but hell no, you're not leaving. So they had a war over it. Okay,
Right, which is what could potentially happen in Seattle. If Seattle said, we don't want to be part of the union anymore,
Absolutely.
the federal government will come in and say, no, we're taking you guys out. You're still a state.
Absolutely.
If you want to secede, there's ways to do that, right?
Exactly.
Because
Well-
Texas has talked about that.
Well, actually, that falls under nullification, and nullification has never been successful in any shape or form. In other words, it is a idea that was put forward by Thomas Jefferson and I believe James Madison, what they call the Kentucky-Virginia resolutions, where nullification as a policy was justified, but nowhere has it succeeded, and Supreme Court has never ever backed up nullification.
Well, hasn't California explored that?
Well, California, they are doing nullification by doing a sanctuary city, sanctuary state. Okay, to me they're nullifying federal law because the federal government handles immigration. Okay,
Well, aren't a lot of people doing that? Like with
Absolutely.
the drugs,
And
with the
then-
marijuana?
Yeah, but it's
in
only
Colorado?
it's very specific though. What they're doing.
but this is where I think any president, I don't care whether it's Trump or whoever, it should not let that happen.
Well, this is where you can cut off federal funds and do
Yeah,
those
well, you
kinds of-
can cut off federal funds, and that's what he's threatening to do with these statutes. He's saying,
which is awesome.
he's saying to the states, if you don't protect these statutes, we're cutting off your federal funds.
Which is
you
great.
know?
I will believe it when I see it.
Well, yeah.
Well, to begin with a threat. Start with a threat.
Yeah, but at least you don't see any taxes coming down here lately.
Well, you don't need to make. He doesn't need to make threats anymore. Like especially in an election year when you have what's going on in this
back
country.
it up. Don't threat. Back it up.
Yeah, you need to make promises. And you need
Yeah.
to fulfill those promises, and we're not really seeing that at this point.
Well, it depends. If you see action from what he said, we are seeing you said that we're seeing a little bit of a reduction in those statutes.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, but that's on one particular area,
yeah.
But we still have CHOP out there. We have, the thing that was disturbing to me through all this, I'm talking about when I sit back and watch these cities burn and these store owners they were targeting us, okay? And what the message they were sending, because and the governors and mayors were complicit in this by allowing it to happen. They were all in cahoots and saying to the people that might vote for Trump, we will not protect you, and violence works. The rule of law doesn't work here. Violence works. I was listening to a woman who had her little kid in a car, and they were attacked by rioters in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Okay, it was a 911 call. She was saying, help, these people are trying to break in my car. I've got my little girl here and everything. They're breaking in my windows and everything on my car. Please help. And the woman said, ma'am, I'm sorry, we can't send anybody out. If you have, and she said, what do you mean you can't send anybody out? She said, well, if you have a complaint, you can make a complaint to gave some department or whatever. And they ended up apologizing, not to her, but to the rioters, later on. Okay?
That's amazing.
Yeah. So what kind of message is this sending to people? Really, you think, what woman with small kids is brave enough to go down here even to the park and sit during a day? Because if somebody around here, they would probably respond. But let's say Philadelphia, one of these blue states, and they were sitting in a park, and all of a sudden a bunch of idiots started messing with them. Would they trust 911 to respond? That sends a terrible message, and this is where.
So let's get into something for a minute. Let's explore this a little bit. Let's say we move into November. Trump gets reelected.
Right.
Let's say the Congress gets flipped and becomes a Republican majority. Okay.
Right.
in theory, these cities have always been locked with the large cities locked up with the Democratic majority. Could that ever change?
Yeah, I think if people, it's like I was watching a thing on Seattle the other night about Seattle is dying, I think was the name of it. And it was incredible what these people are putting up with in the city of Seattle. This before all this broke out with the riots. This was going on before all this, okay? I mean, homeless everywhere, sleeping on the streets, crap, trash everywhere. And all these citizens are going to these city councils, I mean, just hordes of them, and complaining to these people.
Primarily business owners? Or?
Well, yeah, business owners, because they can't do business and all that. And and these guys are just sitting there laughing at them, okay? I mean, this is a city council. They were sitting there laughing at them, okay? Now, I got to believe, that's why I'm not sure about these polls. I got to believe there's a lot of anger in this country right now, you know, with all that's going on. And
now, explain to people what the push polls are so they understand what you mean by a push poll.
A push poll, that's like right now, you're 4 months out from like, how do you verify a poll? How are you as a regular citizen going to verify a Fox News poll, a Rasmussen poll? I don't care what poll, CNN poll. How are you going to verify it? You know, you can't. You know, now, is it true? Okay, it might be, but we don't know. Okay, but I tell you where it has to be true, because if it's not, if you have too many elections like you had in 1936, which the reason the pollsters got it wrong in 1936 was because you've had 3 elections in American history that got it wrong. Okay, I'm talking about presidential elections since they've been polling. 1936, they polled people who owned telephones. Okay, well, guess what? At 1936, most of the people who had telephones were Republicans, so they thought Roosevelt was going to get defeated in 1936. Turns out he won by a landslide. 1948, they quit polling 2 weeks out. Okay, and Truman came up, and it was the Republicans' year. It was theirs to lose. Okay, they played it safe like Hillary did. Okay, and they lost by big to Harry Truman. Okay, you remember the old picture, him standing up there?
Yeah, with the
Dewey wins. You know.
Yep.
Okay, and then the same thing happened in 2016 with the defeat of Hillary Clinton. You know, she was ahead in the polls and all this stuff. That was.
What about with Reagan? What happened for that?
Well, Reagan was different. Reagan, I think, but this is what I was getting ready to say. When you get down to the nitty gritty, when week out or whatever, they got to be right then, because if they're not right and you miss it too many times, then the pollsters lose credibility. Okay, so that's when it counts. That's when it counts, when the actual election comes down. Okay, because they don't want to be too far off. And so, but that's a pretty good record when you think only 3 times in history, and since 1936, that pollster's been wrong. I mean, that's a pretty good record.
So most of these polls are from independent companies. Is that how they do this?
Well,
where does it come from?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure who all's behind them. Usually the news agencies like ABC has a poll. They hire pollsters. And they call it the ABC News poll or the CNN News poll or whatever. Rasmussen, he's supposed to be one of the most conservative, pollsters. But is Rasmussen a Trump supporter, or is he an establishment Republican? Who knows? Who's he talking to? But personally, I see the conditions. I used to think this was going to be 1972 all over again, when you had a radical left-winger called McGovern running against Richard Nixon, okay, who was the law and order. Well, actually, at that time, it was the fact that Nixon had a pretty good track record by that time. It was 4th largest landslide in American history. Well, But I see this as being maybe 68 all over again, because 1968 and the 60s were just crazy. I mean, they were, crazy, because the communists were running rampant then, in the streets and everything. And Nixon became a law and order president, and that's how he got elected. Now, his victory wasn't as big in 68 as it was in 72. Had it not been for COVID 1984 and all these riots and stuff, I would have said that Trump would have won by Nixon's numbers in 1972. It would have been a repeat. But with all this crap going on right now, I don't know how to call it right now. I mean, I still have a gut feeling that people want an end to all this crap, But I got news for you. If Trump wins, it's going to continue. They're going to continue until the day he's out of office.
Oh yeah. But we want to just get over the hump.
Well, yeah, but
what about the mail-in? Where does the mail-in voting stand right now?
I don't know. I haven't done much research in that, but I do know enough about it that the problem you have with mail-in is that the voting rolls that they draw off of, they're not updated. You got dead people, people that are moved out of the country, whatever, that they haven't updated their voting rolls. So there's a potential for a lot of fraud there.
And I just heard, I didn't think about it till I heard it on the news. You can be a foreign country and mail in.
Yeah.
You can mail in votes.
There's no telling.
It can come from anywhere.
Yeah, I hope they can work it out where they don't do that, but I got a feeling there's going to be a lot of fraud in this election, because they're not going to. The difference between this election and 2016, they got blindsided one time. They're going to be ready for them this time, But I want to get toward the end here. One thing, according to two historians, conservative historians, Larry Schweikert and Dave Dougherty, they wrote a book called The Politically Incorrect Guide to the American Revolution. And they stated the 4 pillars of American society. One of the reasons that we've lasted as long as we have is that we have, it's like 4 table legs on a table, okay? And no other country in the world has ever had this, the 4 pillars, okay? And we've had Protestant religious foundation, okay? Now, reason this is important, and this is not, I know you're Catholic and there's no slant against the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church tends to be top down, okay? Protestant religion tends to be bottom up, and it's a lot of independence there. And so the Protestant religion has had a huge influence on America, as a foundation. And you can add within religion, the umbrella of religion, you can add families, the family structure, and a lot of things under religion, traditions, all kinds of stuff. The other thing is the common law. America's always been based upon the common law. England is based on the common law. We get our common law from England. Private property and written titles and deeds, is a big pillar of American society. And the last is a free market economy. These pillars are not found anywhere else. And like I said, it's a bottom-up approach rather than top-down. Now, Karl Marx wanted to destroy all of these. He realized in order to destroy capitalist societies, he had to destroy the church. He had to destroy the family. Look at, years ago, even when I was a kid, a lot of my grandfather's sister was living with us. Families depended on each other. If you can destroy the family, which they've done to a great degree by either welfare or through drugs and through living together and illegitimacy and all these things, then families no longer depend on each other. They have to depend on who? The government. And that's what Karl Marx's goal is to do. So, and like I say, religion has also been part of that umbrella, you know, that people depend, the more religious they are, the more they depend on the church for help in bad times and things like that. The difference between a communist government or big government that the Democrats believe in and what conservatives believe in, Democrats or communists, they make government look bigger and God look smaller, okay? Conservatives and people who believe in the Constitution, believe in our form of government, they make God bigger and government smaller, you know? And so that's the big difference between us. And of course, you know, once you get people with less and less property, then they lose the attachment to property. You know, if you're renting or you're, you know, you don't have anything that you can park your horse and wagon on. You know, you don't have an attachment to private property. You know, and you see more and more of that today. You know, by destruction of the family, you got so many women that are single that, you know, if you want to increase your ability to own property and ability to have wealth, then you don't need to have a child in your 20s, and you don't need to have a child until you're married. You know, two people can have more wealth than one, you know, for the most part. And but anyway, I think, you know, finally, and we'll end on this. If the same principle of delegitimizing governments, or I'm sorry, the American government leads to its destruction, you can also use these same tactics with people. Okay, this is how you can enslave a people, like we did before the Civil War. This is how Hitler could kill the Jews. This is how Stalin could kill broad classes of people in the millions, hundreds of millions. You first delegitimize them or dehumanize them. Okay, and that's what you do when you use racial slurs and you make black people into monkeys, or you know, Slavic people into vermin, or Jews into vermin, or whoever,
or babies into fetuses.
Babies into fetuses. Good, that's a good one. You know, once you dehumanize them, it makes it easier to kill. And I think what's going on right now, you're starting to see this a lot, the way they're talking about white people now. You know, and this is not in any way a racist thing I'm about to say, but it may be our turn now, you know, because this is some quotes from Sarah Young of the New York Times. She's a highly supposedly reputable reporter for the New York Times that they have gone to bat for even after she said these things.
Is that possible, that you can be a credible reporter for
well,
the New York
I'm
Times?
saying in their eyes, not in our eyes.
Right, I'm just
But she said about the white people, she said, "Oh man, it's kind of sick how much joy I get out of being cruel to a white man. Are white people genetically predisposed to burn faster in the sun, thus logically being only fit to live underground like groveling goblins?" And then she put hashtag cancel white people. White people marking up the internet with their opinions that are like dogs pissing on fire hydrants.
And she's still employed.
And she's still employed there, okay?
Interesting.
And also even people on the left have said this, and Obama, we hear this all the time. Obama said this. Many on the left, like Obama, have said that racism is in our DNA. Could this mark us for eventual genocide? Now, DNA, when you say it's in our DNA, that means it sounds like you're born with racism, that you have no choice, you don't have no control over it, that you're just naturally going to be a racist if you're born white, you know. So, you know, historians, you show me any country that's ever been taken over by the communists. Now, I'm not talking about, they always want to point, the socialists want to point, like Bernie Sanders, they want to point to the Norwegian or the Scandinavian countries as an example of this is what we want to be, okay? Well, first of all, the Scandinavian countries are not socialists. They're capitalists that have a lot of socialist programs, okay? But true socialism always leads to communism. And communism, as soon as communism comes in, then mass murder follows, okay? And this is why I'm trying to wake people up to the danger that is being posed. I'm going to tell you, we are, and I know this has been said so many times, people poo-poo the idea, but this election is so important, and people just don't know, because we could slide into darkness, you know, with the election of Joe Biden, because I don't think Joe Biden will be. He's not going to be the one in control. He's going to be manipulated and run by other people. And we've already seen, we've gotten a taste of what's going to happen. We've already gotten a taste of how they feel about us. You know, and when I say us, I don't mean white people. I mean all people. You know, there's black Trump supporters, there's white Trump supporters, there's Asian Trumps, you know, it's a group of people who think like us, okay? And that's what I'm talking about, you know. So, anybody got anything before we?
I think you're right. I think you nailed it when you talk about fundamental change. For them to delegitimize the founders will ultimately delegitimize the foundation and the founding documents, right?
Right. That's what.
So you're going to have fundamental change.
Absolutely.
Another thing I was sitting here thinking about is in 2011, Judge Scalia from the Supreme Court made just one of the most fantastic speeches before Congress that I like to go to a lot and talk about. And he mentioned what's the term when America is considered better than other countries?
Exceptionalism.
Yeah. American exceptionalism.
We are exceptional.
Right. And I used to think that was a prideful kind of thought, right? I used to think, why do people say that? We're not exceptional. We're not better than other people, but that's not what it means. What Judge Scalia meant by American exceptionalism, he explained before the Senate. I think he was testifying before the Senate in 2011 when he said this. He explained that every banana republic in the world has a Bill of Rights. He said the Bill of Rights isn't what makes America special.
No.
He said what makes America special, and I'm going to just paraphrase for summary here, is the gridlock, is the separation of powers.
Right.
And see, people don't like that because they can't get what they want done.
Right.
So they have to try to dismantle the separation of powers.
Right.
And they have to try to legislate from the Supreme Court because that's the way to circumvent what happens in Congress and with the executive branch. You and I were talking about this yesterday, how you go through the rigors of getting a law passed, and then the Supreme Court, like they did today, or was it yesterday, where Judge Roberts sides with all the liberals and strikes down what they did with the abortion clinics in Louisiana, where they tried to stifle the abortion clinics. And here we have a supposedly conservative judge who sides with 4 raucous liberals to squelch what they were trying to do in Louisiana when he had every opportunity to set a precedent. So you have this legislation from the Supreme Court. You have people wanting to tear down what we're doing. And I think ultimately what you're talking about is removing the Constitution and just changing the country.
Yeah. Well, see, the Democrats don't like elections, especially the ones they lose.
They didn't like the Electoral College because it beat them.
Because they lost.
That's right.
Okay.
They want to dismantle it.
And to me, Electoral College is the one of the most brilliant things the founding fathers ever come up with. And
representation.
And see, I hear this all the time about he's not a unifier. The founding fathers didn't want us to be unified. They want us to be not this divide and conquer thing. But they wanted us
checks and balances.
Checks and balances.
Yes, it's what makes America great.
Right.
It's what makes America exceptional, that you have this balance of powers. Yeah. So I've often told people, I have people tell me about, I can't believe Donald Trump's the president. Well, don't worry, he's not a king. He has certain powers,
right,
but he's not a king. And if Joe Biden gets elected, he's not a king. But if Biden gets elected, you lose the Senate and you lose the House, then you're toast. Then it's not. And then if you have a liberal Supreme Court, you're really toast.
And this to me is kind of a nightmare scenario. It may take a few years. I never thought I would live to see what we're going through right now.
Amazing.
But let's say a radical regime gets in there, and okay, we have the Second Amendment. I get it, but what if they were to say, and look how much control they have over Walmart, over Target, over this, over that, Adidas, Nike, all these different places. And what if they were to get in there and they say, okay, we look at the records and you own this gun, okay? Either you give them up or you're not going to work, And how many people are going to see their families starve or whatever? Everybody's talking about gun confiscation. They may not even have to do that. Well,
look at what's happening now. You can't speak freely without fear of reprisal of losing your job.
There's people fired for saying all lives matter.
That's right. I have to create a pseudonym so I can speak freely, so people can't say, "Hey, such and such said this."
Right.
Are you going to allow your employee to say things like this?
Right.
When it's nothing radical. It's basically talking about biblical principles, but somehow that's become anathema today.
Yeah. And so I can see a nightmare. So, and when people hear me say that, they think, oh, you're just another one of these conspiracy theorists. But I'm going to tell you, 20 years ago, if you'd told me, let's say after 9/11, if you told me that 19 years after 9/11 we would be in the situation we're in right now, I don't know if I'd have believed. I would have I thought you'd have been a conspiracy theorist.
Yes. Well, look at what just happened to Facebook.
Yeah.
Facebook just got roped in or bullied into doing what the advertisers want them to do because Verizon and them got bullied into it. Verizon, Coke came out and said, we're going to pull our advertising from Facebook until they stop the hate speech. In other words, until they shut down the conservatives.
Right.
That's what they mean.
Yeah, because only conservative talk is hate speech.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what happens is people start pulling back, right? Because they're like, I got to feed my family.
And
you talk about conspiracy theory. Well, there's a biblical conspiracy theory. If you remember in Revelation, it says that unless people receive the mark of the beast, they can't buy or sell anything.
Absolutely.
So what are we I'm not saying we're in the end times. Some people are saying
now
that.
we're in the end times, but we're not. We don't know how close we are.
Right.
Yeah.
But what's happening right now, we're seeing that people are being thwarted in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
Your job is all of a sudden on the line if you want to speak freely and have a differing opinion.
Absolutely.
With the perpetuated narratives today.
Absolutely. And it's working because how many people are brave enough? Now, I know you're not a big Trump guy, but like him and, he is brave enough to put a Trump sticker on his car, but most Trump stickers, most Trump support stickers.
Oh. I don't know what I thought you said.
I said Trump stickers.
Okay.
But most Trump supporters are afraid to wear a Trump hat. They're afraid to put a sign in their yard. So it's working. It's beating us down.
Yeah.
You know, and I refuse to play the game. You know, that's just the difference with me. You know, and I got a sign. I mean, a shirt that kind of reflects my attitude. I'm too young to die and too old to take a ass whooping. So, you know, so, you know, you don't attack an old man, okay, especially one that's armed, you know, but that's just the way it is. But, cause I mean, you know, the great equalizer's got to come out, you know, but anyway, okay. Anybody else got anything? Well, I just want to warn everybody, if you're an atheist or if you don't like religion or whatever, I'm going to ask Ken to close us out with a prayer.
Oh, hallelujah. All right. Lord, we just thank you. We pray for anybody who's listening, whether they are atheists or believers, that we all come together, that people who disagree with us know that we love them, sincerely love them. And we want to have an open dialogue. And so we pray you bless our speech, that the arguments would stand on the merit of the arguments. I thank you for Greg and what he's doing with this podcast. And we just want to continue to do everything for your glory and for your praise. And we pray for our nation. We pray that you would heal our nation. And we pray that you would make us bold in walking in your ways so that it might motivate good things and unity. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen.